Welcome to episode 2 of the Colossal Color Comparison series. In this episode, we're going to be taking a close look at Phthalo Turquoise. The last episode ended up being 30 minutes long, and I totally realized that that's way too long for a YouTube video and it had just way too much information. I totally underestimated how much information we were going to get from these test sheets. So what I'm going to do from here onwards is to break each of the colors down into 2 episodes. In the first part, we're going to be looking at the general wash, the colors and stuff. We're going to be talking about the information sheet and the transparency, lift and glazing sheets. And then in the second episode, we're going to be talking about the gradated washes, the salt test and the color mixes. And that way the episodes will be more bite-sized and easier to watch. So let's take a look at Phthalo Turquoise. And I know I said in the first episode that I'm going to be trying to make the series compare by color names rather than pigment codes. But Phthalo Turquoise is one of the, I think, 3 colors I'm going to have to make an exception for in this series regarding just going by color name. And the reason why that is different brands tend to name their phthalo colors in very different way. A lot of phthalo colors get called by their brand name followed by the color. So instead of colors like phthalo blue, you get Windsor blue and stuff like that. And phthalo turquoise is exactly the same. They come with lots of different names. So what I've done is picked colors from brands when we think of phthalo turquoise. So we have 10 different brands and we have lots of different names. Daniel Smith's one is called Phthalo Turquoise. Holbein's one is called Marine Blue. Sennelier's one is called Phthalocyanine Turquoise. Schminke's one is Helios Turquoise. Winsor & Newton's one is Phthalo Turquoise. Kohl's one is Phthalo Turquoise. M. Graham's one is called Turquoise. Da Vinci one is Phthalo Turquoise. Mission Gold has 2 colors that we would think of as Phthalo Turquoise. One is Peacock Blue and the other one is Marine Blue. But looking at the color samples, I thought this was close to what we would think of as a Phthalo Turquoise. And then we also have Lucas's version, which is just called Turquoise. Phthalo turquoises tend to come in 2 different variations in terms of pigments. One is to combine a phthalo blue with a phthalo green, and that you can tell because they'll use phthalo blue green shade, which is the PB15:3, and the phthalo green is PG7. And that covers a lot of brands. We have Kohl with that pigment code, Sennelier's one, M. Graham's one, and Mission Gold's one. Daniel Smith went slightly differently by going with the phthalo blue green shade, but then used PG36 instead of PG7. The other variation is to use the PB16, a single pigment on its own. So if you are concerned about single pigments, which by the way I personally don't feel you need to worry about, then you can always go for the single pigment PB16 instead of the 2 combined pigments. In terms of prices, as always, I took prices from Jackson's website and I haven't found a source for Da Vinci in the UK, so this is just UK price. Price vary depending on where you are, and I worked out the per milliliter cost of these colors. The cheapest one is Sennelier because we don't have a Jackson's Phthalo Turquoise or a cast Phthalo Turquoise, and that is at 41 pence per milliliter. And then the most expensive, as always, is the Kohl one at £1.16 per milliliter. Of course, Lucas is a little bit cheaper than the Sennelier one, but it is kind of a student quality one, although it's not classified as. You'll see that I would classify as student quality in a minute, but that is at 32 pence per milliliter. So this is the cheapest one and this is the most expensive one. In terms of the hue of each of the colors, Phthalo Turquoise comes with a lot of variety in hue. The most noticeable one is Core's one for being the most green. I would say this is outstandingly green compared to the rest. The rest are somewhere in that greenish, bluish kind of range, whereas I would say that this is hard leaning almost towards phthalo green. I don't think there's much blue in this mixture at all, and I would actually personally question this as being a phthalo turquoise because it's just so green. The second most green one we have is the Senneliers one. I would say this is more greenish rather than this is like green. It's definitely turquoise but leaning towards the green. The third greenish one is the Daniel Smith one, but for me personally, and bearing in mind that we see color differently, I would say that this is the most green end of what I would define as phthalo turquoise. And then you get a lot of colors that are more leaning towards the blue compared to, say, the core one. So phthalo turquoise come in a wide range of hues, warm turquoise blue to the more cooler greenish turquoise. I still have a problem with this one though. In terms of re-wet, all the colors re-wet fine, even the Winsor Newton one, which in the ultramarine episode gave me a bit of trouble. I still felt that with the Senneliers one, it was a little too easy to wet because I'm so used to non-honeyed versions, whereas the Sennelier one was just so easy to re-wet that I was having trouble controlling how much paint I re-wet and took onto the brush. Funnily enough, I don't have that same problem with the M. Graham one in this color or the ultramarine one that I've tested so far. This is again a honey-based color, but I don't have that same out of control re-wet issue. However, as you can see, unlike the ultramarine blue, the Phthalo Turquoise by M. Graham went on very, very patchy. The ultramarine blue went on smoothly and it would kind of even out on its own, whereas, as you can see, this is very uneven indeed. There's a huge range of value from the very dark to the much lighter shades. And I would say that Mission Gold's one suffered from the same issue in that it has really dark patches and then some much lighter patches, whereas the other colors are pretty okay. It's the unevenness in color, which is expected on a cheap paper like this one, and I'm using Fabriano Academia for these tests. And you expect the cauliflower and stuff, but these two colors in particular looks really uneven. So as much as I loved the ultramarine from M. Graham, I don't think I would invest in turquoise by M. Graham. The colors that went on smoothly the most, I would say, was the Da Vinci's one and the Schmincke's one. These were really, really nice, and even on cheap paper like this, it's pretty good. Holbein was pretty good as well, as was the Daniel Smith and Lucas. Phthalo colors are going to be prone to cauliflowering though, especially on cheap paper like this, so I would be very careful when you use it. In terms of dealing with the cauliflowering, I have to say, even though Sennelier's one, I find it really wets too easily and goes on a bit gloopy, I don't like, is very good at dealing with the cauliflowering, as well as the Mission Gold's one, even though the color is uneven, as well as Da Vinci's one and Lucas's one. But I think the main deciding factor is going to be which hue of Phthalo Turquoise you personally like. Let's move on to the second sheet. So this is the transparency, the lift and the glazing one. I noticed in the last video that it's very difficult to catch the transparency just on these narrow bands. So what I've done from this episode is also paint it on big sheets of black, and hopefully it will show up better the transparency properties of each paint. So let's look at that first. The first thing you notice is the Lucas one. And this is why I wouldn't call Lucas's one a artist quality one. I would say this is more student quality one. It definitely has a lot of filler, and you can feel it when you're getting the paint off it and when you're painting it on here. Once it's on paper, you don't really see that it's a pretty opaque color. It's quite hard to tell in this particular shade, but when I was putting it on, I was like, oh yeah, that's not a transparent color at all. And you can see that on here, hopefully, that there's a lot of deposit compared to the other colors. Phthalo Turquoise should be a pretty transparent color, so there should be no reason why we would see this much color. The only reason would be is because there's a lot of filler to make the paint more affordable. And that is pretty much a definition of a non-artist quality watercolor, in my opinion. Now you can see some deposit, as in you can see where I've painted, but in terms of the most transparent, I would say Daniel Smith is pretty good, so Sennelier and Schmincke. The other colors like the Holbein, the M. Graham, Da Vinci and Mission Gold are great as well, but if I have to pick the most transparent, it will have to be the Daniel Smith, Sennelier and Schmincke. Winsor & Newton weirdly has this red glow to their paint, which I'm not quite sure what that is. That's not to say that they have red in them. It's just the physics of painting something onto black paper and then seeing what color gets reflected back. So I hope this is a little bit easier way of seeing the transparency of each paint. It's interesting that I would classify Schmincke as one of the most transparent one, because Schmincke actually classifies their color as semi-transparent and not fully transparent, but I would say it's pretty transparent as well. Mission Gold is another brand that classifies their color as semi-transparent, but I would say it's pretty good. Yes, I see more deposit than the other colors, so technically yes to semi-transparent, but it's nothing like the Lucas ones, and they classify theirs as semi-transparent as well. In terms of staining, according to the data provided by the brands, and if you want to see this up close and all the other shoots that I create for this episode and all throughout the series, I put high-res scans of all of this up on my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Oto Kano. So do check it out and get close looks at these sheets. Back to staining and lifting, the only brand that has given me the information for staining levels that didn't say that this color was highly staining was Mission Gold. They said it's half staining rather than fully staining like all the other ones. And I would actually agree with that. From the test sheets, the color that lifted out most easily was Mission Gold, probably closely followed by the Holbein one. I would still say that Phthalo Turquoise is a very difficult color to lift off paper, but there was an interesting thing I noticed while I was lifting off the paper, and that was that some colors would create this smooth lift, whereas other colors such as M. Graham, Lucas and Core creates a more patchy texture in the area left behind once you've wet the page and then dabbed it off. I'm not sure what that means, but it was just an observation I made while I was doing the test. Basically, with Phthalo Turquoises, be sure that you want it where you want it when you put it down, because you're not going to get that paint out of that paper once you put it on. In terms of glazing, because it's a highly staining and transparent color, you're going to have a great time glazing with them. The color below it isn't going to lift up every time you put another layer on. And you're going to be able to see through the different layers because of the transparency. And I would say they do that pretty well. Even the Lucas one, which we've already discovered that it's not the most transparent color, you can definitely see the two different layers going on. So it won't be as good as this professional brand, but it's not bad for how affordable it is if you don't mind the filler. I do think there is a problem with glazing with the M. Graham and Mission Gold though, because of these unevenness in the paint. but the rest are brilliant at glazing. So that is the first half of having a look at Phthalo Turquoises. What do you think about these colors so far? My personal favorite has always been Daniel Smith's Phthalo Turquoise. It's actually my second most favorite color in the world, but I do still have a soft spot for the Marine Blue by Holbein as well. I'm very surprised by the core and how green it is. If any of these colors take your fancy, then do check out the description below this video, because I've left links to all the colors and where to find them, so you can find them very easily. If this video was interesting and useful to you, then please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!